Okay, let's get started. Welcome to a Thursday morning stream coming from Denver, Colorado. And today I wanted to talk about 5 of the things that I consider to be the best plugins inside Logic. And while this list could be different for every single person, and I hope if you're watching, and I'll remind you as we go along to add your favorites as well in the chat. But I hope that you'll also learn some stuff about some of the plugins I'm going to talk about. Some of these are ones that you probably have seen or used, so there's nothing like hidden about these, but I think for this particular video, I'm looking at things that I would have a hard time finding in other workstations. So that's one of my criteria for today is looking at things that if I were to switch to Reaper or Studio One or Reason, which of these things would I have a really hard time finding in other places in the same functionality? So we're going to look at a couple instruments and a couple of effects, and that's where we're going to start. So we're going to start with the one that's on the screen right now, which is Sculpture. This is, in my opinion, one of the instruments that is the most unique in Logic in many ways, because instead of using traditional synthesis techniques or sampling techniques, it uses a model of a string, is what it calls it, and so it's really using some stuff that's different in terms of how you would create sound. This is the default patch. Now, I've done videos about Sculpture in the past. I did a whole series of streams how to use it. A couple things that I would say right off the bat. One of them is if you're using this, down at the bottom, we do have a render mode that starts in basic as a default for most, I think maybe all the patches. And I'm almost always now switching it to the high definition, which changes the functionality a little bit of the sound engine. But I love how much depth there is to this instrument. So we've got these 3 objects. We've got the material that the string is made out of. We've got some effects. We've got a really intense modulation section with a morph pad, which allows us to go between 5 sets of settings. And we can even automate that with an envelope path. I mean, this thing is an intense instrument. But for me, and the way I like to think about this, so Alchemy could be on this list. We'll see in a minute, but Alchemy is great in terms of the power of Alchemy, but Alchemy, it doesn't work how I would think of an instrument creation. It's very much more like a real sterile lab environment in some ways. It's very powerful, but I would say it doesn't lead me down creative paths as often, as easily as Sculpture does, because Sculpture uses things like, we have this object 1, we can say, I want it to be an impulse or a strike or a bow. It's like those words trigger something in my brain that means something outside of this. And so I'm building this more organically, like an acoustic instrument in some ways. Awesome sounding instrument. If nothing else, definitely go through some of the presets. I've used some of the guitar ones every once in a while. Because it's not a traditional synth or a sampled instrument, you get a little bit more useful things out of it. Plus, I mean, it's like what things would you think about? It's like, well, when I play my guitar, not every note sounds exactly the same, right? And so we can actually come in with some of these parameters and say, I want it to, every time I play that, I want it to change just ever so slightly. Well, we have some of that ability here to do that on each note, to have a little bit of jitter, or I would say variation or even randomness involved with some of those things. So we can create really cool sounding instruments that the notes live like real instruments. And then, of course, if you're pairing that particular thing with some of the other like amps and pedals, then cool. I mean, you can really pair this with some of those things. Let's do like it's not going to sound like a real guitar. I mean, nothing really sounds like that. There are some things, but this is not exactly that. You can have a lot of fun with it with guitar-esque sounds. Anyway, cool. That would be number one for me. Excuse me. And keep those comments coming. I see Q Coletti has listed the best stock plugin as the compressor. That actually is on my list as well. There are other compressors out there, and actually in Logic we have a couple different types of compression tools, but I never reach for anybody else's compressor. I mean, that's the sign to me that this one does a decent job. And specifically, there's a feature with this that I use all the time. It's not necessarily specific to Logic. So this, I know my criteria say things that I would have a hard time replacing. I do think the ease of use of this and the sound I get from it and the different colorations with all the different algorithms is a benefit to this that I don't see in every compressor out there. But just as an example, we're going to load up a drummer for a minute. And I'm going to use the compressor on the drummer instead of the one I just loaded. So a few features that I really like. First, we have the needle that comes down, showing that. But the graph mode is what I recommend to all of my students and people that I'm working with Logic, because it's a really great visual representation that you don't see in every compressor. And we could load up other compressors to compare, but that's one thing. And then having all of these other styles of compression, which give us slightly nonlinear and based off of specific models out there of hardware compressors. So we get a bunch of different options. So if we're not really liking how one is sounding, then we can easily change it. And then we have the built-in mix knob, which other platforms often have this built into their software. This one is built in right into the compressor, and some of the other compressors out there have this. So I wouldn't say it's completely unique, but it certainly is not everywhere. And so I can change how much of the input versus the output I want right that moment, which means I can do a lot of like companionship style compression and really do some heavy compression, but mix it back with the uncompressed sound, and you come up with a more natural thing. So you get like the compressor filling in kind of the sound of the drums without taking away all of the natural parts of the drum kit. I mean, a compressor is a compressor. It's not like a really fancy thing that has a lot of bells and whistles. And so most compressors are going to do the job. I just think this one in particular, the layout makes sense to me. You know, it's easy to see the settings I'm doing. The graph mode is great. All of these other versions, you don't see that in too many compressors to have all of those options. So maybe I'm trying to do the LA2A or more of the like the Focusrite Red, or it's like, you know, all of those things. You get to go through and decide which one is working based on the sound that you're doing. And then Q-Coletti also adds the fact that we have soft clip on any of the compression emulations is incredible. Exactly. So, I mean, it's just like every little piece of a compressor that they thought of, all of the tools that I would have used, maybe one compressor for in one place or something else. It's like every little aspect of it is included here. So again, not necessarily unique in the overall world of compression, but certainly all of the tools that I need. And sometimes I need something else, you know? And so, at least in Logic, I will say that we do have, for instance, under Dynamics, the limiters, the enveloper, which is amazing, the multipressor, which needs an update. I mean, this thing needs an update so badly. And I would love to see some of the parts of the normal compressor built into the multipressor. But this allows us to do frequency band compression and expansion, and technically limiting, because you can do a ratio of 30-1. So it's like a limiter, compressor, or an expander on each channel. So cool. It's also like an equalizer. I can solo out different frequency bands and just work with those and have everything else muted. So I mean, it's a very powerful tool that needs some updating visually. Who cares about visuals? But I do care about that it can be hard to use because the visuals don't always lend itself to being easy to use at the same time. Okay. And Q-Coletti agrees with the multipressor comment as well. Awesome. In that same vein as the compressor, which has all of those features and things, we have a lot of synthesizer tools, instruments inside Logic. And the one that I keep coming back to all the time, even though I understand how to use all of them, and I mean, I've written a book for Routledge on synthesis. It's like I understand synthesis as well as anybody. But I find myself coming back to the retro synth all the time. For many of the same reasons. One of them, besides the fact that it has a dark interface, which I don't always like, I think when the contrast is like this, it becomes harder to see when you're doing too much with like mimicking of instruments in the real world with the wood and the metal and the little light flare. It's like that stuff I don't care about as much. But I just think that this synthesizer is easy to get some of the basic subtractive synthesis results that I want in about as fast as time as it's possible. But that's not the only reason I like this instrument. Because it's not just a subtractive synth. It's also has the ability to do sync, has a wavetable synthesis engine, and a frequency modulation. So it's like essentially 3.5 synths in one. And these ones, I mean, you can load your own tables in here. Excuse me, I haven't talked yet, I guess, today. You can load your own wavetables. I mean, most people don't even know what wavetable synthesis is, let alone that Logic has one. But some of the sounds you can come up with this are things that we can't get anywhere else. Let's find a preset that has something interesting. There we go. Let's go back. Oh. Wavetable synthesis is where I go for more industrial sounds in many ways, coming up with some real digital things that it's hard to come up with in other places. This in combination with like a MIDI effect, because I think we have the ability to do some oscillation over here. So we have like the filter envelope. we don't have, let me see if where's there. So we do have enough to do it kind of with the modulation built on. But I always am using, I love the modulator as a place to go because I feel like it expands on these sections and makes it a little bit easier. So we're going to learn plugin parameter of the shape one. And then, of course, because we have one modulator, this is the power of the modulator. And this is actually, of the things I've talked about, number 4. Because this is one of the more powerful things. So I'm going to load up a second modulator. And in this modulator, I'm going to use a slow rate LFO to control the rate of the other one. Oh, I don't need to play the drums. So back to the retro synth, and then we'll talk about the modulator for a second. You have a lot of power, but it's simplicity that really draws me to it. It means I can get to things even faster for certain sounds. The FM synth on here is limited. It's not like the full DX7, but you're able to get many of the same sounds. So you're able to get a lot of those like glassy, metallic sounding things that you could on a DX7. Let's see if I can find any other presets. I'm just scanning presets right now. I wish the preset system for these would be better. When you go into here, it doesn't do them by type of synthesis engine. It just does them all side by side, which, at least I think. I don't think there's a way to filter it out. Okay, let's hear one more. I mean, that sounds like a DX7 to me. Cool. So great instrument. It's really powerful, even though if you go back to the first one, it looks like a 2 oscillator basic subtractive synthesis tool. We can come in here. It has so many things like the detune of the voice, the stereo spread. We can do 8 voice unison. That's going to blow out some speakers. Let's go back to the initial setting. Do 8. So this is what it sounds like with unison off. Right, and we'll do 8 voices. That's loud too. So cool. I mean, this thing is simple, yet unexpectedly deep. And I use it all the time for that type of sound of any of those synths. Even though Alchemy can do it, Alchemy can be a nightmare to get to the sounds I want because of the sheer volume of options. Okay, so let's talk about this thing, the modulator. One of the best MIDI effects in Logic, and also the one that everybody wishes was available for audio tracks, because there's so many things we can do with it. Let me take those 2 off that I've programmed something on, just put a fresh one. You can control any plugin that's on the channel with it. All you do is have to say, learn MIDI, learn plugin parameter. It has to be a plugin that's below. So for instance, let's just choose that. But it's not just limited, to simple LFOs. It's like we have all of the stuff. We've got a lot of control over it. There's so many useful things with this. Ooh, lose my mouse again. Here we go. You might be saying, well, why not just do that with the onboard filter on the RetroSynth? And the answer is you could. I like the visuals of it better this way. I like being able to see the way it's visually representing, so I have that other additional check in addition to listening. But also, not everything that we're doing has that functionality. So for instance, if I'm just pulling out some random drum kit, right? MIDI effects don't work on audio channels. But if this was a MIDI, let me find a MIDI one. You can actually. It's a long story. Long story short, you can use these effects on audio channels. You just have to route them in a special way, which I'm not going to do right now. But I just wanted to show this with a Drum Machine Designer. And let's just do channel EQ, right? We call default. Okay, cool. MIDI effect, modulator. Learn that. And then I'll do the similar thing as I was doing before. And then I'm going to hit V to close all my plugins and just solo this out. Let's go back. You can just add little bits of flavor to all of this stuff. It's very cool, the sounds we can come up with if we can just think about it. Okay, let's see. And Cuculette says they're addicted to Serum. And, Serum's great. I don't use it. But I've heard so many great things about it and have seen it and used it in the past. And then one of their biggest feature requests is modulator and audio track, which I was just talking about. And then Nasty CRV says, have you found a good voice cloning plugin or software for Logic? One that can allow a producer to add background vocals in the voice. So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. In terms of voices, I use a few things. None of them are Logic. So I use East-West background vocal singers plugin, which is amazing. And their choirs, which you can type and have them sing whatever you type. And then I've been messing around with some of the AI voice generators. I'm actually working on a new video for a company this week to talk about theirs, which is pretty cool. So I've used a few things. Logic doesn't have any good background voice generators. And none that I'm using are actually cloners. So it means I'm not able to take someone's voice that I know, like a person I'm working with a studio, and then use some mechanism to get them to sing something later. That is still a little bit elusive right this moment. Obviously, people are doing it, but I wouldn't say it's like ready for primetime studio work as of this very second. Cool. Okay. Lastly, and anybody else, so for those in the room, make sure you take a second right now and list your favorite or the things in Logic that you think are the best plugins. Not necessarily features. We're looking at plugins specifically. We've looked at Sculpture and Compressor, Retro Synth, and the Modulator. I feel like we could go on for like my favorite 15, what I think are the best. But when I'm trying to narrow it down to 5, I think that's a really useful exercise. For instance, I use the drummer track all the time. But right now I'm not thinking it's the best. There are things that you can get in third-party solutions which are really great. And in many ways, the drummer track has fallen behind. The potential is there to be amazing, right? But it's not fully amazing at this moment. And so hopefully our next update, and we should be getting something, at least a small one or a big one in the next week or two. The new operating system is dropping next week. And so I think it's next week. Maybe it's 2 weeks. I'll have to look. It's in the next couple weeks. I know they just announced it on Tuesday when it was going to be coming out. I just haven't looked at it closely, the actual release date. So if you know, let me know in the chat as well. But once the new operating system comes out, then we're going to be able to expect the Logic update, just a basic functionality. But this time of year, we tend to get new features as well. And so at the very least, we should be getting a Logic Pro for iPad update of some sort, which is a sore spot in my world right this minute because I've been paying monthly for it, but it's not changed at all. So we'll see if that's just a compatibility update for the Logic Pro for iPad. If that's the case, we'll see how long I keep my subscription going, right? It's like, geez, come on. Like, do something. Don't just like sit there. Now, obviously they're doing something. It's just this, the long wait time with things that aren't perfect that sometimes irks me a little bit. Okay, September 26th. Thanks, Q. So that is 2 weeks away still. I don't even know what day it is. I'm looking right this second. Yeah, so less than 2 weeks by 2 days. So we should see some stuff then. And then hopefully, we all have our things that we hope Apple's going to update on Logic. Drummer track is one of those things for me. I hope that they make it better in the next version. So it can do more. It's pretty good as it is now, but it could be so much better. We not too long ago, it feels like a couple years now, got all the new sampling functionality in Logic, the new sampler, and all of that functionality, which is what we're going to talk about in just a second. But I don't think we need anything right this moment there except for the normal, bug fixes and efficiency updates and things. A lot of our other plugins are fine as they are. We've got good reverbs and EQs and all that stuff. But a lot of companies are now doing things like AI versions and auto things that, that can help you and make your mix better without you having to do all of the work. And I'm okay with that, I think. I think that as long as we have the ability to still control things and work on it, if I've got a task that I know I'm going to do 100 times in the next month, and an AI or machine learning or some smart design of an EQ can do it for me, then I'm okay with that because it's going to save me from doing it the next 100 times, and I can free up my time for other stuff. Cool. So let's talk about my last thing, which isn't exactly one plugin, sadly. It's a suite of plugins, which is or includes all of the sampling functionality in Logic. Now, Logic has always been good at a lot of this stuff. I remember at the very beginning, or not the very beginning, a long time ago, Galaxy, we could do this thing where we could take an audio file and convert to new sampler track, and it would like split up all of that part into like a playable instrument. Let me find where it is. I don't know where. It gave us one no. Oh, there's no transient markers. That's why. Let's do that one more time. Convert to new sampler track. No, it says. I guess nothing there was. Anyway, you could do all this stuff, right? Convert things into the EXS24 and trigger them. Well, things have just gotten so much better, starting with the ability to drag any audio file over onto the header. We're going to do quick sampler optimize for a second. And now that file is a playable right? So now we can actually play it, control it, manipulate it, do time, flex time with it, have it follow the tempo and fill in the things. This is like Logic's answer to Simpler and Ableton. So it's a great tool for like certain types of sampling where you have one file and you turn it into something you want to really manipulate. There's a whole mod section. I mean, it's really good. You can record directly into this from your interface. Super cool. We can also, and let's do. So I've got that synth loaded up. I'm going to load up really quickly the auto sampler, which lets me take this synthesizer I've made, either a software one inside my computer, or we can do this with external instruments. So if you have an external synthesizer or keyboard that's MIDI controlled, then you can create a full sampled version of it here and turn it into an instrument you can play with the sampler, which, double click, there we go. Our full sampler is amazing. It has this look that Logic has gone to with plugins, which I don't mind. I think it's okay. It looks good. The contrast is a little bit funky. It's like, why do we got to make everything so dark? But that's okay. So all of the tools here, if anyone's ever done any like multi-sampling in the past where you create instruments, very few things are as good as this right now. In the sense that we can come through and do auto mapping, remapping, looping of everything for us. All the splitting of everything, and then we can have it. It's like so much of this process now is automated, and then lets us tweak. In the past, with the EXS24, if we wanted to do that, it would take hours and hours and days to create a complex instrument. Now, with this set of tools, so much of it is already done for us. Then, so we have the quick sampler, simple sampling. And by the way, if you have a quick sampled instrument, I believe you can just open that directly in the sampler. Does that? Yeah, it's there. So I just opened up the sampler in the same place and it opened up that file directly there. Great. But then if we're doing some of this stuff, we can actually take that instrument and bring it into alchemy. So it's like we have then the whole creative world of sampling that alchemy allows us with all of their different parts. So for instance, if I want to do this as like a granular drum kit, I'm going to do this in alchemy. So then I can mangle it. One of the sampler and quick sampler each function in different ways, but they keep it pretty true to the original. In the alchemy version, we can keep it true to the original, but we can also use one of their resynthesis engines and then mangle it and make crazy things with it. So all of those things form one of the best sampling engines of any tool that's out there. It matches at the very least and surpasses most. So that's what I was going to say about that. Okay. Runner-up or runners up, right? How many do we have of those? Alchemy itself would be something I would talk about. The drummer track I would talk about. In terms of effects, this is a little trickier. There's a lot of effects. None of them are like mind-blowing or things that we don't have in other places, I would say, for the most part. We have, amp emulators and pedal boards other places outside of Logic. Everybody has some sort of delays. Now, the delays are okay, but it's like the delay designer is not super easy to use or fancy in that direction. We have a lot of distortion. All of them are pretty normal. I'll come back to there. EQs we got emulations of EQs that everybody else tends to have. Our match EQ tool would be close to a runner-up, but I wish it did more in terms of dynamic EQ matching, but it's really good. Our linear phase, a lot of people have those. We have a horrible vocoder. That's not great. We have a direction or a stereo spread, which is subpar, but okay. And we have a lot of metering tools, but everybody does. Modulation, I would say if you're into ring shifting, that the ring shifter in Logic is world-class. Our multi-effects, the remix and step effects would be runners up for sure. Those are incredible. Not remix, the fat effects and the step effects, the two we got from Camel Audio. The remix, it's fine. It's cool, but it's not like amazing. The pitch stuff is everywhere. Reverb, I would say Space Designer, maybe, just because you can import IRs that you've recorded or found, but you can also synthesize your own IRs using parameters inside this. That means you can create pretty much any custom reverb you want. It's pretty cool. The last runner-up then would be our enveloper, which very few things do exactly this, where we can really boost up parts of our envelope of our sound. This thing is amazing. Okay, cool. That's the list. I hope this is useful. And I hope if you're watching this later, make it to the end, that you have put some of your own comments in there. LA Winter, how you doing? We're about to wrap up here, it looks like, but thanks for joining. I hope this list is useful, that you learned something. We're going to be doing more videos like this until the next update. We're just, trying to get more talk about Logic right now and more people exploring and pushing their own personal boundaries with this. So make sure you're checking back and subscribed and notified so that way you can see when we're going to do these streams. Other than that, that's it. Go make some music. Get off YouTube, everybody. Just kidding. Stay on YouTube when you're watching my videos, but then go make music away from it. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Talk to you later.